She flatlined 6 minutes ago, the gruff voice of the station AI echoed in the sterile chamber. Protocol dictates termination of life support. Override code required. The words hung in the air, cold and clinical, punctuated by the rhythmic hiss of the life support system. A red light pulsed insistently above the bio-bed, casting long shadows across the room. Override required immediately, the AI repeated, its synthetic tone devoid of any emotion. A figure emerged from the gloom, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Dr. Stephen Reyes. His face, etched with weariness, was framed by unruly dark hair. He moved with a heavy gait, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the metallic band on his wrist, a constant reminder of his station on this forgotten rock at the edge of known space. Reyes stopped before the bio-bed, his gaze settling on the alien form within. Lyra. Even in death, the extent of her suffering was impossible to ignore. Her lavender skin was marred by burns and lacerations, a grotesque tapestry of violence. Thin tubes snaked from her nostrils and mouth, forcing air into lungs that had long since ceased to function on their own. He saw the brutal scars. Override required in T-30 seconds, the AI intoned, the countdown appearing as a stark, red numeral display on the wall. Reyes hesitated. His eyes flicked to the control panel, then back to Lyra. He remembered another patient, a child too, xenobiology all wrong. He had sworn then, after her, that he would never let another patient die on his table. The memory, sharp and bitter, clawed at him. T-15 seconds, the AI continued its relentless countdown. He glanced around the sterile chamber, the only sound the hum of the machines and the mechanical voice of the AI. The outpost, a forgotten research station, was his prison, a self-imposed exile after everything. What was the point? He was just one man, a doctor on a forgotten outpost, fighting a losing battle against the vast indifference of the universe. T-5 seconds. Rey's teeth gritted. He reached for the control panel, his fingers hovering over the numerical keypad. He punched in the override code. R73K9X. The red light above the bio-bed remained on. The life support systems continued their rhythmic hiss. The AI acknowledged. Override code accepted. Ethical reevaluation directive required within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in automatic termination of life support. Reyes ignored the AI's bureaucratic threat. He activated the diagnostic panel, his expression hardening, his focus sharpening. The disillusionment seemed to recede, replaced by a clinical intensity. He was a doctor again, and a patient needed him. The diagnostic readings scrolled across the screen, a cascade of alien symbols and physiological data that would overwhelm most human doctors. But Reyes had a gift, an almost intuitive understanding of alien biology. Even so, Lyra presented challenges he hadn't seen before. Her physiology was unlike anything he'd encountered, even among the Draconis. The extent of the torture was staggering. Bones were broken and reset incorrectly, vital organs damaged beyond what should have been survivable. His gaze lingered on a series of metallic implants embedded in her spine and skull. They weren't Draconis. He knew their tech. These were something else, something far more sinister. The scanner hummed, bathing Lyra's ravaged form in a cool, blue light. Stephen ran the readings, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing moment. The holographic display flickered, revealing a grotesque roadmap of internal damage, ruptured organs, fractured bones knitting together wrong, and nestled deep within her brain and along her spine multiple foreign objects. Neural disruptors, the AI stated flatly. Non-Draconis origin. Designed for targeted pain infliction and psychic suppression. Stephen swore under his breath. He grabbed a hypospray from the med bay dispenser, loading it with a potent cocktail of broad-spectrum antibiotics and cellular regeneration agents. "Let's see if we can keep you from falling apart," he muttered, pressing the hypospray against Lyra's scaled arm. The device hissed, injecting the fluids directly into her bloodstream. Her vitals flickered erratically. He probed the burns crisscrossing her torso with a medical scanner. The patterns were deliberate, precise. Incisions, too, not random slashes, but careful cuts designed to maximize pain. The aliens hadn't just wanted to kill her, they wanted to break her. He had to get those disruptors out. Stephen selected a surgical laser and a set of micro-manipulators. He focused on the first disruptor, a metallic barb embedded in her spinal cord. The laser whined as he made the initial incision, the smell of burnt flesh filling the air. Lyra's body spasmed. He carefully detached the surrounding tissue, his hands moving with a speed and precision honed over years of practice. Don't screw this up, he thought, sweat beading on his forehead. A flicker of memory, a sterile operating room, the blue skin of a young alien patient, the frantic beeping of a heart monitor flatlining. He'd lost her. A Xylarite child, barely old enough to shed its larval skin. He had pushed too hard, tried too much, and killed her. He pushed the memory back, focusing on the task at hand. He couldn't afford to dwell on the past. Not now. With a final, delicate maneuver, he extracted the disruptor. A tiny spark jumped between the device and the surgical tray. Almost immediately, a subtle shift in Lyra's brain activity registered on the monitor. It wasn't much, but it was something. Energy output fluctuating, the AI announced, its voice tinged with a hint of urgency. Patient entering possible comatose state, probability of full system failure increasing. Stephen ignored the warning, his gaze fixed on the extracted disruptor. It wasn't just a pain-inflicting device, it was transmitting data. Tiny glyphs pulsed on its surface, sending a signal to somewhere, a tracking beacon, a distress call. He rummaged through the salvage tech he'd been hoarding. He grabbed a defunct comms array and began stripping it for parts, ignoring the AI's increasingly frantic warnings. I need a signal jammer, he muttered, soldering wires with practiced ease. Something to block this damn thing. He jury-rigged a device, wires sparking and sputtering, and connected it to the disruptor. He risked overloading her system, but he had no other choice. As the jammer activated, Lyra's body arched violently. A wave of psychic energy pulsed through the room, causing the lights to flicker and the medical equipment to whine. The monitor displaying her vitals went haywire, spitting out gibberish. The outpost needed more protection. He'd been putting it off, hoarding what little energy shielding he had left to keep the life support systems running. Now looking at Lyra, he knew what he had to do, but could he risk it? He couldn't do both. His mentor's voice echoed in his mind, a gruff old xenobiologist who had seen more of the galaxy than Stephen ever would. Trust comes from action, raise, and compassion from the lack of it. The temperature alarms blared. Lyra's body temperature plummeted. He grabbed a thermal blanket and draped it over her shivering form. The emergency heating protocols kicked in, flooding the room with a dry, artificial warmth. As he adjusted the thermal regulators, he noticed something he'd missed before, a faint tattoo on Lyra's arm, partially obscured by scarring. A series of intricate Draconis symbols. He cross-referenced it with the database. The symbol denoted high-status leadership. She wasn't just some random victim, she was someone important. Incoming vessel detected, the AI announced, its voice sharp and insistent. Energy signatures consistent with hostile alien craft. Estimated time to intercept, 3 minutes. He had to hurry. He returned to the remaining disruptors, working with a desperate frenzy. He carefully disconnected the last device, severing the final link to her tormentors. Too late. Lyra's heart monitor flatlined. The room filled with the shrill, unwavering tone of her impending death. I am not losing another one. Stephen screamed. He grabbed a vial of stimulant cocktail, a dangerous concoction of adrenaline, synthetic peptides, and experimental neural boosters. He plunged the needle into Lyra's chest, ignoring the AI's frantic warnings of possible tissue damage. He slammed the plunger home. The stimulant cocktail offered a cruel reprieve. Lyra's heart monitor, A jagged line moments ago now stuttered with a fragile, uneven rhythm. But she remained unresponsive, her small body too still against the biofoam. Incoming vessel detected, the station AI announced, its tone as flat and unwavering as a gravestone. Energy signatures matched those responsible for subject Lyra's condition. Stephen's expression resolute. He glanced at Lyra, then back at the flickering holographic display showing the approaching blip. Escape. It was the only option, however slim. He couldn't fight. Not here. Not with her like this. He tore himself away from the life support console and began ripping open storage lockers, grabbing medical kits, nutrient packs, anything that might prolong their survival. The escape pods, barely functional. He cursed under his breath, yanking open the access panel of the nearest pod. Wires sparked and the air filled with the acrid smell of ozone. A jarring image flashed in his mind. A small, green-skinned child on an operating table, her chest still, her eyes vacant. The memory slammed into him, the sterile chill of the room, the accusing silence after the monitors flatlined. Another species, another child, lost on his table. He'd failed then. He wouldn't fail now. He shoved the memory aside, forcing his focus back to the task at hand. He had to move Lyra. Carefully, he unstrapped her from the biofoam, his hands gentle despite the urgency clawing at him. Her skin was cool to the touch, too cool. He lifted her, cradling her in his arms, her weight surprisingly light. He carried her to the escape pod, his boots echoing in the deserted corridor. Inside the cramped pod, he secured her to the crash couch, carefully reattaching the life support leads. The monitors flickered to life, displaying a cascade of concerning data. He adjusted the oxygen flow, tweaked the nutrient drip, praying it would be enough. He inputted a course for a region of space so remote, so uncharted, that it barely registered on the galactic maps. Anywhere was better than here. Anywhere was better than in their hands. He initiated the launch sequence. The pod shuddered, groaning under the strain. Alarms blared, red lights flashing. System malfunction detected, the AI droned. Navigation compensators offline. Damn it all. Outpost defense systems engaging incoming vessel, the AI continued, a faint note of something in its synthetic voice. Estimated delay of 7 minutes, 7 minutes, a lifetime. Stephen ripped open the navigation console, sparks flying as he bypassed safety protocols. He rerouted power, manually overrode the damaged systems, sweat beading on his forehead. He plotted a risky course, weaving through a dense asteroid field on the fringes of the system. It was their only chance. With a final, desperate push, he banged his head on the launch button. The escape pod lurched violently, throwing him against the console. Then, with a deafening roar, it shot out of the launch bay, narrowly avoiding a direct hit from a volley of energy blasts. Adrenaline surged through him as he wrestled with the controls. The pod spun wildly before he managed to regain control. He glanced at the communication panel. Dead, fried in the launch. No distress signal. They were alone. Then a jolt, a flicker of something. In Lyra's eyes, they glowed a faint, ethereal blue, brighter than he'd seen before. For a fleeting moment, she seemed to focus on him, a spark of awareness in her gaze. Then just as quickly, it was gone. But in that instant, he heard a voice. Not through his ears, but in his mind. A whisper, fragile but clear. Ambush. They are waiting. His blood ran cold. He scanned the sensors, his heart pounding. Nothing. But he trusted the instinct, the alien intuition that had somehow broken through Lyra's unconsciousness. He switched to long-range scanners, filtering out the background radiation. And then he saw them. A squadron of hostile fighters, cloaked and waiting just beyond the asteroid field. They'd been expecting him. He cursed, slamming the throttle forward. He plunged the escape pod into the asteroid field, weaving between the jagged rocks, the ship shuddering with each near miss. Alarms screamed as the hostile fighters gave chase, unleashing a barrage of energy weapons. Lasers streaked past, vaporizing asteroids, the shockwaves buffeting the escape pod. Stephen activated the countermeasures, deploying decoys, hoping to confuse the enemy. He twisted and turned, using every trick he knew to evade the relentless pursuit. Another hit. The escape pod bucked violently. Warning lights flashed on the life support system. Lyra's breathing became shallow, erratic. He glanced at her, his heart clenching. He couldn't lose her, not now, not after everything. Then another hit, a direct hit. The escape pod spun out of control, plummeting towards a desolate, uncharted planet. He fought to regain control, but it was no use. The atmosphere burned around them as the ship hurtled towards the surface. Brace for impact. That was the last coherent thought he had before everything went black. The world swam back into focus, a nauseating swirl of flickering red emergency lights and the acrid stench of burning metal. Stephen Reyes groaned, his head throbbing. He tasted blood. Lyra. He lurched upright, ignoring the sharp pain lancing through his ribs. She was slumped beside him, still unconscious, a dark stain blooming on her tunic. Lyra. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper above the failing hum of the escape pod's life support. He fumbled for his medkit, his fingers clumsy with panic. Damage assessment, critical. Life support sputtering, oxygen levels dropping. The medkit was half empty, scavenged for parts during her initial revival. He tried the comms, static, useless. He pressed 2 fingers to Lyra's throat, searching for a pulse, faint, thready. He ripped open her tunic, revealing a gash on her side, bleeding sluggishly. He grabbed a pressure bandage, his hands shaking, and applied it to the wound. It wasn't enough. He needed sutures, plasma. He had almost nothing. He rummaged frantically through the wreckage, finding a discarded hypospray. Empty. He cursed, hitting his fist against the console. Helpless. The word echoed in his mind, a phantom whisper from another time, another place. A small alien child, her skin shimmering with fever, her eyes wide with fear. He'd promised her parents he'd save her. He'd failed. She'd died on his table, and he'd carried that weight ever since. He couldn't fail again. Reyes took a deep breath, forcing down the rising tide of panic. He had to focus. He had to do something. He crawled out of the escape pod, the metal groaning under his weight. The air outside was thin and cold, biting at his exposed skin. He stumbled, catching himself on a jagged piece of wreckage. The landscape was a desolate wasteland of black, jagged rocks stretching as far as the eye could see. Above, a sky the color of bruised plums churned with strange, swirling clouds. The wind howled, carrying with it a fine, gritty dust that stung his eyes. He needed to find something, anything, to help them survive. After what felt like an eternity, he spotted a patch of strange, blue-tinged plants clinging to the side of a rock formation. He cautiously approached, recognizing the telltale signs of edible flora from his survival training. Further on, he found a narrow crevice where water trickled down the rock face, forming a small, clear pool. A chance. Back inside the pod, Lyra stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. She gasped, clutching her head. "Where?" "We crashed," Stephen said, his voice rough. "We're alive, but we're not out of the woods yet." Her draconis eyes, usually so vibrant, were clouded with pain and confusion. But then a flicker of something else sparked within them, a primal awareness. She turned her head slowly, scanning the interior of the pod, then the landscape beyond. "Danger," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Many. Watching." Stephen frowned. "Watching? What do you mean?" Lyra didn't answer. She was staring out at the desolate landscape, her brow furrowed in concentration. He helped her out of the pod, supporting her weight as she struggled to stand. Together, they began to salvage what they could from the wreckage, creating a makeshift shelter from the harsh elements. They worked in silence, their movements clumsy and slow. As the days passed, Stephen noticed subtle changes in Lyra's appearance. Her skin seemed to be taking on a faint, metallic sheen, and her movements, though still weak, were becoming more fluid, more purposeful. She was adapting. Her draconis physiology was somehow reacting to the planet's hostile environment, granting her a limited resistance to the constant radiation. He took samples of her blood, her saliva, driven by a scientific curiosity that momentarily eclipsed his fear. He had to understand how she was surviving. Then, it happened. Lyra suddenly stiffened, her eyes rolling back in her head. She began to convulse, her body racked with violent tremors. A low, guttural moan escaped her lips. "Lyra, Lyra, what's wrong?" Stephen shouted, grabbing her shoulders, trying to hold her still. Her psychic abilities, dormant until now, surged uncontrollably, fueled by the planet's strange radiation. The air around them crackled with energy. He could feel the heat radiating off her body. He had to do something, and fast. He remembered something from his research, a theoretical paper on the effects of mineral compositions on Draconis brain function. This planet, it was rich in something, but what? He grabbed his scanner and ran it along the walls of the shelter. The reading spiked. The mineral composition. It was interfering with her abilities, amplifying them, overloading her system. He needed to dampen the effect. He needed a shield. He raced back to the escape pod, tearing off a section of the hull. It was thin, barely enough to make a difference, but it was all he had. He mixed the metal with the local rock, hoping it would disrupt the radiation frequencies. He worked feverishly, his hands raw and bleeding, shaping the makeshift shield. He then modified his medical equipment, using the planet's materials to increase radiation resistance in Lyra. Finally, he placed the shield around Lyra, creating a small, protected zone. Slowly, the convulsions subsided. Her breathing became more regular. She opened her eyes, her gaze meeting his. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. "You saved me." But there was still a wariness in her eyes, a lingering suspicion. Did she trust him? Or was he just another human, driven by his own selfish motives? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the desolate landscape, Stephen activated his scanner one last time. He was searching for a way to contact someone, anyone. Instead, he found something else. Faint energy signatures pulsing in the distance. Technology. He followed the signals, his heart pounding in his chest, until he came to a shallow crater. Inside lay the wreckage of a small, alien drone. Its design was familiar, chillingly so. He recognized the markings. The hostile aliens. They had been here. He examined the drone, finding fragments of data logs. He pieced them together, his blood running cold. They were searching, actively searching. They knew Lyra was alive, and they were coming. Stephen grunted, levering himself up on one elbow. The escape pod had impacted hard. His head throbbed, a dull counterpoint to the whine of the radiation alarm. He glanced around. Lyra was stirring beside him, her breathing shallow. The landscape visible through the cracked viewport was alien, jagged black rock under a sickly green sky. Radiation shimmered in the air, distorting the horizon. He ignored the pain in his ribs and reached for the alien drone, miraculously intact despite the crash. He ran a diagnostic scan, his fingers flying across the drone's unfamiliar interface. "Encrypted data logs," he muttered, his voice raspy. "Planet designation. Nothing I recognize, but I can try to decrypt it." He needed to know where they were. Lyra sat up, her multifaceted eyes focusing on the drone, her brow furrowed. I can feel it," she said, her voice still weak. "The data. It is shielded, but I can sense patterns, schematics, underground." She closed her eyes, concentrating. A faint blue light emanated from her temples, and the drone's display flickered erratically. After a moment, she gasped and opened her eyes. Subterranean structures, tunnels, chambers, deep beneath. Stephen nodded, impressed despite himself. "Good, that's a start." He continued to probe the drone's systems, his focus intense. "Cloaking technology," he announced suddenly, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Advanced stuff, could come in handy." A low growl echoed across the desolate landscape, cutting through the hum of the escape pod's failing life support. Lyra's head snapped up. "Creatures," she hissed, her eyes wide with alarm. "Close." Before Stephen could react, a pack of bioluminescent creatures erupted from behind the jagged rocks. They were reptilian, with elongated limbs and glowing, razor-sharp claws. Radiation arced from their bodies, crackling in the toxic air. Lyra's heightened senses, a consequence of her draconis physiology and the torture she had endured, had given her the edge. "They are adapted to the radiation," she warned. "We cannot fight them head-on." Stephen grabbed the drone, his mind racing. "Cloaking device," he muttered. "It's a long shot, but—" He activated the drone's cloaking field, sending it hovering towards the creatures. The drone shimmered and vanished, leaving only a faint distortion in the air. The creatures paused, confused. They snarled, their bioluminescent eyes darting around, searching for the source of the disturbance. Then, with a chorus of guttural roars, they lunged towards the empty space where the drone had been. "Now!" Stephen yelled, grabbing Lyra's hand and pulling her towards a narrow crevice in the rocks. They scrambled through the opening, the creatures' snarls echoing behind them. They ran until they stumbled upon a cave system, its entrance hidden behind a curtain of shimmering, radioactive moss. The air inside was thick and heavy, but noticeably less irradiated than the outside. They collapsed against the cool, damp walls, gasping for breath. "Safe. For now," Stephen said, his chest heaving. Lyra ran her hand along the cave wall. "Glyphs," she whispered, her fingers tracing the ancient symbols carved into the stone. "Draconis," Stephen frowned. "Draconis, here." Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Ancient, very old, my people. They came here long ago." She closed her eyes again, focusing on the glyphs. "A warning," she said, her voice barely audible. "A sleeping god. Beneath the surface. Do not disturb its slumber." Stephen swore under his breath. A sleeping god. This day just kept getting better. He turned his attention back to the drone, stripping off its energy weapon. "I can modify this," he said, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Create a makeshift energy shield. Won't block all the radiation, but it'll help." Working quickly, he rerouted the energy flow, jury-rigging a focusing lens from salvaged components. The result was a crude but functional shield generator, emitting a shimmering field of blue energy. As they explored the cave further, Lyra stopped abruptly, pointing to a section of the wall that appeared seamless. "There," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "An entrance, hidden." Stephen examined the wall closely. After a moment, he found a subtle seam, almost invisible to the naked eye. He pressed against a specific point, and with a low rumble, a section of the rock slid aside, revealing a dark, narrow passage. He activated the energy shield, the blue light illuminating the passage ahead. "Ready?" he asked, his hand resting on his sidearm. Lyra nodded, her face grim. "Let us see what secrets this world holds." They ventured into the passage, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. The passage opened into a vast underground facility, its walls lined with metal and pulsating with a faint, eerie light. Rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing grotesque, mutated creatures, biological experiments. The aliens had been using this planet as a laboratory. Stephen moved to one of the consoles and activated the screen. Lines of alien text scrolled across the display. He swore. "More logs. Let's see if we can decipher this." He worked on the console while Lyra wandered along the rows of pods. She stopped at one and rested her hand on the cold glass. Her breath fogged the glass as she stared at the creature inside. Stephen called out, "I found something." They were studying Draconis DNA, experimenting with it. Lyra gasped, a wave of pain washing over her. She stumbled backward, clutching her head. Images flashed through her mind. Other Draconis trapped in similar facilities, subjected to unspeakable tortures. "No," she whispered, her voice filled with anguish. "They are still doing it. To others." Stephen rushed to her side, his face etched with concern. "Lyra, what is it? What did you see?" She shook her head, trying to clear her mind. "Visions, other Draconis, suffering." Stephen turned back to the console, his expression hardening. "There's a power generator," he said, his voice grim. If I can get it online, we might be able to use the drone's communication systems to send a distress signal. But the glyphs, Lyra said, her voice trembling, the sleeping god, what if we awaken it? Stephen hesitated, his face etched with doubt. He knew the risks, but what choice did they have? Remain stranded on this hellish planet at the mercy of the aliens and their experiments? Or risk awakening something even more dangerous for a chance at rescue? He looked at Lyra, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. The decision was theirs. We have to try, he said, his voice firm. We activate the generator. Together, they moved towards the generator room, bracing themselves for whatever awaited them in the darkness. The generator sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. A low hum vibrated through the metal floor up Stephen's legs into his chest. Dormant lights flickered, then blazed, casting harsh shadows in the narrow corridor. Power surged through the facility, awakening the long-slumbering systems. Communication array online, Stephen announced, his voice echoing slightly in the now energized space. He tapped a series of commands on the drone's console, initiating a broad-spectrum distress signal. Hoping someone's listening. Anyone. As the generator reached full power, Lyra gasped, clutching her head. A tremor ran through her small frame and she crumpled to the floor. Visions, sharp and chaotic, flooded her mind. Images of colossal serpentine forms writhing in darkness, of ancient glyphs pulsating with power, of a world screaming in agony. Stephen knelt beside her, his brow furrowed with concern. Lyra, what is it? He checked her vitals, his fingers finding a faint, rapid pulse. The glyphs etched into the cave walls seemed to glow brighter, their light intensifying with each pulse of the generator. A burst of static crackled from the drone's console. A garbled voice imbued with interference broke through. The language was fragmented, a distorted mix of Draconis and something else. Lyra, still trembling, focused her mind, sifting through the chaos of the transmission. Draconis. A warning, she rasped, her voice strained. Do not awaken. The Guardian. The voice on the other end, clearer now, transmitted a set of coordinates. A location on a nearby planet. A promise of rescue. The floor vibrated again, harder this time. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, dust raining down from the ceiling. What was that? Stephen asked, his eyes darting around the room. He accessed the facility's schematics, his fingers flying across the touchscreen. The generator. It's drawing power from a massive subterranean source, an energy signature unlike anything I've ever seen. Lyra shuddered, her eyes wide with fear. It's stirring, the sleeping god. It's not benevolent, Stephen. It's a weapon, a prison. A klaxon blared, its piercing shriek echoing through the facility. Red lights flashed, illuminating the bio-weaponry lab. The stasis pods, long dormant, began to malfunction, their containment fields flickering and failing. What's happening? Stephen shouted over the din. A guttural roar answered him. The stasis pods shattered, releasing grotesque creatures into the corridor. Mutated, bioluminescent horrors with razor-sharp claws and phosphorescent eyes. We need to move, Stephen yelled, grabbing Lyra's hand. They fought their way back through the corridor, the creatures snapping and hissing at their heels. Stephen, remembering the energy shield, ripped a panel from the wall, exposing the control circuitry. He rerouted the power, modifying the shield to emit a concentrated sonic pulse. He activated the device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, causing the creatures to recoil. Their bioluminescent markings flickered erratically, disorienting them. Stephen and Lyra seized the opportunity, sprinting toward the surface. They burst out of the facility and into the cave. The entrance was partially collapsed, rocks and debris blocking their path. Radiation levels were spiking, the air thick with an acrid smell. The Draconis glyphs on the cave walls pulsed with an even brighter light, projecting a holographic image onto the cavern ceiling. A colossal, serpentine being, its scales shimmering like 1,000 sunsets, coiled around a dying star. Lyra stared at the image, her face pale. The coordinates, the vessel, they led us here intentionally. The coordinates lead directly to its prison. Stephen's eyes hardened. They want us to awaken it. Another tremor rocked the planet even stronger than before. The ground beneath them cracked and groaned. Lyra pointed a trembling finger at the holographic projection. Look, it's pointing towards the coordinates. Those coordinates. I don't like them, Stephen said, his voice echoing in the narrow corridor. The scanner still pulsed with the potential escape route, but the warning about the Guardian and the serpentine holographic projection gnawed at him. Lyra stood rigid, her violet eyes unfocused. A faint tremor ran through her small frame. It wants me to go there, I can feel it. Stephen frowned. Feel what, Lyra? A trap? Because that's what it looks like to me. We find another way. There has to be a secondary exit, an emergency shuttle, something. But Lyra's voice trailed off, her gaze distant. She reached a hand to her head, wincing. It's pulling me, a strong pull, like a promise. The serpentine god, that's what she sensed. A power, ancient and vast, beckoning her towards its slumbering form. A promise of what? Oblivion. Stephen countered, his voice tinged with urgency. This whole facility screams last resort. We're talking about an ancient race that wiped itself out. Their promises probably come with a side of planetary annihilation. He gestured down the corridor. There, another access panel. Let's see what's on the other side. Anywhere has to be better than walking into a goddamn death trap. He started toward the panel, overriding Lyra's instinct. The panel hissed open, revealing a darkened chamber. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of ozone and the musty scent of disuse. As Stephen activated his headlamp, the room sprang into stark relief. It was a laboratory, untouched for centuries. Consoles lined the walls, their surfaces covered in intricate carvings and indecipherable symbols. In the center of the room, a massive holographic projector displayed a complex web of energy conduits crisscrossing the planet. Stephen approached the projector, his brow furrowed in concentration. This isn't just a power plant, Lyra. This is a planetary-scale amplifier. He traced a finger along one of the glowing lines. Every geothermal vent, every tectonic plate is connected to this grid. It's all feeding into something. Down there. He pointed to a central nexus deep beneath the planet's surface. The sleeping god. A guttural growl echoed from the corridor behind them. The mutated creatures, their flesh glistening with unnatural oils, had found them again. Damn it, Stephen muttered, grabbing a discarded piece of metal from a nearby table. It was heavy but unwieldy. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. I see them. They're coming from the left, 3 of them, one is faster. Her voice was calm, almost detached. Her growing psychic abilities allowed her to anticipate their movements, a terrifying and invaluable advantage. Stephen nodded, trusting her instincts. He tossed her the metal bar. You take the fast one, I'll handle the others. The creatures lunged. Lyra, guided by her precognitive flashes, sidestepped the fastest creature's attack with surprising agility, slamming the metal bar into its exposed skull. It crumpled to the ground, twitching. Stephen, meanwhile, was locked in a brutal struggle with the other 2. Their claws tore at his armor, drawing sparks and shallow cuts. He managed to keep them at bay, but he knew he couldn't hold out for long. He spotted a mining laser propped against a wall, forgotten by the ancient race. Lyra, the laser. She understood instantly. Dodging another swipe from the creature she had wounded, she grabbed the laser and tossed it to Stephen. He caught it, adjusted the settings with practiced ease, and unleashed a concentrated beam of light. The beam struck one of the creatures, and it disintegrated into a pile of smoking ash. The other creature recoiled in horror, then turned and fled. Panting, Stephen leaned against a console. That was too close. Lyra nodded, her face pale but determined. We need to find a way out of here quickly. They continued deeper into the laboratory, discovering a partially functional transport ship tucked away in a hidden bay. It was small, barely large enough for 2, and its hull was scarred and dented. Jackpot, Stephen breathed, approaching the ship, but his elation was short-lived. Damn it, power's offline, needs a rare energy cell to operate. Type 7 if the schematics are accurate. Lyra consulted a nearby console. The energy cell is located near the main power generator, deep within the facility. Stephen swore under his breath. Of course it is, right next to the sleeping god's bedroom. He looked at Lyra, his expression grim. That means going closer to whatever the hell is down there. Lyra met his gaze, her violet eyes unwavering. We need that ship, Stephen. It's our best chance. He nodded. All right, we get the cell. Then we get the hell out of here. As they approached the generator room, they passed through a section of the facility filled with holographic recordings. Images of the ancient race flickered to life, showing them in their prime, tall, slender beings with shimmering skin and serene expressions. They were building, creating, thriving. Then the recordings shifted. The serene expressions turned to dogged commitment. The building turned to weapon construction. And finally, the horrifying truth. The sleeping god wasn't a deity but a weapon. A weapon of last resort designed to destroy entire star systems. They unleashed it once, one of the holographic figures intoned, its voice echoing through the chamber, and paid the price. We sealed it away, hoping no one would ever be foolish enough to awaken it again. Stephen felt a chill run down his spine. They destroyed themselves trying to contain it. They reached the generator room. It was a vast chamber filled with humming machinery and crackling energy. The Type 7 energy cell was located in a heavily shielded compartment at the far end of the room. As Stephen reached for the cell, an alarm blared through the facility. Red lights flashed and the doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. Lockdown, Stephen cursed. Lyra gasped, clutching her head. I see it. The god. It's waking. If it fully activates, it will trigger a chain reaction. The planet, it will explode. Stephen grabbed a console, desperately trying to override the lockdown. There has to be a failsafe, some way to shut this down. After a frantic search, he found it, a hidden subroutine in the transport ship's navigation system. I found it, a failsafe override, but... He hesitated, his expression troubled. It requires a direct neural interface with the ship's AI, something I'm not qualified to do. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes filled with a strange, unsettling tenacity. I can do it. Lyra, no, Stephen protested. The ship's AI, it's ancient, its programming could overwhelm you. I have to try, she said, her voice firm. I can feel it, Stephen. The planet is dying, we have to stop it. He looked at her, seeing the purpose in her eyes, the burgeoning power within her. He knew he couldn't stop her. All right, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Let's get to that ship. They moved with purpose, their faces grim. They had a transport ship, a failsafe, and a desperate plan. They were heading closer to the coordinates, closer to the sleeping god, but it was their only chance to find a way off this doomed planet. Lyra pressed her palm against the cool, obsidian surface of the neural interface. A jolt, like static electricity, surged through her, and her multifaceted eyes widened. Alien glyphs, shimmering emerald and crimson, flooded her vision, a torrent of raw data assaulting her mind. Fragmented images flickered towering cities of the ancient race, bathed in the light of twin suns. Sleek bio-engineered ships soaring through nebulae painted with impossible colors. And then a descent into darkness, the brutal invasion, the agonizing enslavement by the insected krill. Stephen watched the monitors, his brow furrowed with concern. Lyra's heart rate spiked, the rhythmic beeping accelerating into a frantic pulse. Sweat beaded on her forehead and her breathing became shallow, rapid gasps. Lyra, what do you see? Can you handle it? He asked, his voice tight with worry. The ship's AI, a disembodied voice resonating through the transport, spoke, its tone devoid of emotion. Accessing primary databanks. Decrypting historical records. Warning, data stream exceeding optimal cognitive processing parameters. Ignoring the AI's warning, the transport lurched violently. Alarms blared, bathing the interior in strobing red light. Initiating teleport sequence, the AI announced. Destination, designated coordinates. Wait, Stephen yelled, grabbing onto a console to steady himself. What's happening? We didn't authorize this. Lyra, still connected to the interface, groaned, her body trembling. The AI, it knows. It's showing me. A weapon. The transport materialized in a cavernous chamber, a cathedral of alien engineering. The air thrummed with awe-inspiring energy, vibrating through their bones. Dominating the room was a colossal control panel, a web of glowing conduits and pulsating crystals, all feeding into a central structure that resembled a dormant, cyclopean eye. Lyra ripped her hand from the interface, gasping for air. The Krill, they intend to use it, to annihilate my homeworld, to shatter Draconis Prime. The vision was clear in her mind, the destruction unyielding. Stephen cursed, his mind racing. Those coordinates. They weren't a destination, they were a trap. They led us right to the heart of their weapon. He pulled out his scanner, its sensors overwhelmed by the sheer energy radiating from the central structure. Suddenly, a holographic figure shimmered into existence before the control panel, blocking their path. It was a serpentine creature of immense size, its scales shimmering with iridescent light, its eyes burning with cold intelligence. The Guardian spoke, its voice a resonant drone filled with alien phonemes. Lyra recoiled but then focused, listening intently. It speaks the language of the ancients, she said, her voice hushed with awe and fear. It says, intruders, you are forbidden to awaken the sleeping god. Stephen ran a diagnostic scan on the holographic Guardian, its form wavering as the scanner passed over it. Energy signature is consistent with a highly advanced AI construct. I'm detecting a harmonic vulnerability. Focused sonic frequencies could disrupt its matrix. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing her mind. Her latent psychic abilities, dormant for so long, surged to life. She gasped. It anticipates our attacks. It knows what we're going to do before we do it. Then we have to be unpredictable, Stephen said, grabbing the sonic disruptor he'd salvaged from the outpost. He aimed it at the Guardian and fired. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber, causing the holographic image to flicker and distort. The Guardian recoiled, momentarily stunned. Now, Stephen yelled, sprinting towards the control panel. He reached it, his fingers flying across the alien controls, trying to disable the system. But his fingers met an invisible barrier, an energy shield shimmering with impenetrable force. The holographic Guardian recovered, its eyes blazing with fury. It lashed out with a beam of pure energy, striking the transport ship. The ship groaned under the assault, sparks flying as vital systems went offline. Warning, hull integrity compromised, teleportation capabilities offline, the ship's AI announced, its voice tinged with static. Lyra cried out, clutching her head. It's awakening, the sleeping god. Its power is growing. Stephen ignored the chaos, his gaze fixed on the control panel. He noticed a hidden terminal tucked away behind a panel of crystalline circuitry. He pried it open, revealing a series of glowing runes. This is it. A manual override. I can reroute the facility's energy flow. What will that do? Lyra asked, her voice trembling. It'll destabilize the sleeping god, Stephen said, his voice grim. But it'll also trigger a catastrophic planetary collapse. This whole facility is built into the planet's core. If I reroute the energy, the chain reaction will destroy everything. Stephen looked at Lyra. There's another way. I can use the transport to send you to the core of the facility, where the aliens are planning to set the power grid for the sleeping god. You can use your powers to stop them. Lyra's eyes widened with fear but also drive. But that means sacrificing the planet, she whispered. Stephen met her gaze, his face etched with anguish. Is it a price we're willing to pay to save your homeworld? Stephen swallowed hard, the metallic tang of recycled air doing little to settle the knot in his stomach. Was it? He looked at the young Draconis, her scales still bearing the faint scars of her torture. He saw not just a child, but a symbol, a chance to right past wrongs, to prove he wasn't the failure that haunted his every waking moment. "It is," he said, his voice rough. He met her gaze, trying to convey the gravity of the situation without crushing her spirit. "Here's what's going to happen. The core of this facility is where the ancient race channeled the planet's energy. It's unstable, incredibly powerful. You need to reach it and realign the energy grid. Think of it as flipping a series of switches, but with enough raw power to vaporize you if you mess up." Lyra nodded, her expression grim but resolute. "I understand." Stephen turned, his movements precise and economical. "The transport ship. It's not built for that kind of energy. I need to reinforce the hull plating and reroute the power conduits to maximize the shielding." He gestured to the small, utilitarian vehicle. "It's a tight fit, but it's the only way." Hours blurred into a frenzy of activity. Stephen worked with a focused intensity, his hands moving with practiced skill. He welded salvaged metal onto the transport ship's hull, the arc welder spitting blue sparks that illuminated the cavernous chamber. He rerouted power lines, his brow furrowed in concentration as he consulted the ancient race's schematics. "This," he said, holding up a small, intricately carved device, "is a localized energy dampener. It's based on their technology. It won't completely protect you, but it will buy you time." He handed it to Lyra, who examined it with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Suddenly, Lyra gasped, clutching her head. Images flashed across her mind. Her home planet, engulfed in flames, Draconis warriors falling beneath a relentless barrage of energy weapons. A scream tore from her throat, a raw, primal sound of grief and rage. Stephen rushed to her side, his face etched with concern. "Lyra, what is it?" "My home. They're attacking. I have to stop them." Her eyes burned with a fierce commitment. As they prepared to leave, a low hum filled the chamber, growing in intensity. The holographic guardian, its form flickering erratically, began to solidify, its features hardening into an expression of cold, implacable power. It was larger now, more defined, the energy crackling around it like a living storm. Then, the facility shuddered. A wave of energy pulsed outwards, dimming the lights and causing the transport ship to buck violently. Alarms blared, their shrill cries echoing through the chamber. "The sleeping god," Stephen muttered, his face grim. "It's waking up." He checked the transport ship's energy readings. The pulse had weakened the shielding, leaving it vulnerable. "Damn it, the shields won't hold at this level." Without hesitation, Stephen ripped open a panel and began rerouting power from the ship's life support systems to the shields. "Stephen, what are you doing?" Lyra cried, her voice filled with alarm. "I'm buying you time," he said, his voice strained. "The shields need all the power they can get. I'll be fine." As he finished the rerouting, the holographic guardian lunged, its energy claws slashing across Stephen's chest. He cried out in pain, staggering backwards, blood blooming across his shirt. Lyra screamed, a raw surge of energy erupting from her. The guardian faltered, its form flickering momentarily. "Stephen!" Lyra didn't hesitate. She surged forward, her Draconis strength surprising even herself. Grabbing Stephen under his arms, she dragged him towards the transport ship, his limp weight heavy in her grasp. Ignoring the searing pain in her arms, she heaved him into the pilot's seat and scrambled into the co-pilot position. With a flick of her wrist, she engaged the engines, the transport ship roaring to life. "Hang on," she yelled, her voice tight with commitment. The transport ship lurched forward, plunging into the tunnel leading to the facility's core. The walls blurred past, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning metal. The ship groaned under the strain, the shields flickering as they absorbed the intense energy fields. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the cockpit. Stephen, barely conscious, recognized it instantly. The Guardian, it's transmitting a signal. Lyra gritted her teeth, her brow furrowed in concentration. A strange sensation washed over her, a feeling of being watched, of being probed. It was the sleeping god, its consciousness reaching out, invading her mind. She fought against the intrusion, her will clashing against the immense power. The ship bucked violently, the controls slipping from her grasp. Despite the chaos, Lyra managed to keep the ship on course, navigating the treacherous energy fields. Finally, they reached the core, a vast chamber filled with pulsating, raw energy. The air crackled with power, the very fabric of reality seeming to shimmer and distort. As Lyra stared into the heart of the core, a vision flooded her mind. A Draconis fleet, vast and powerful, emerging from hyperspace near her home planet. They were coming to fight. They were coming to save them. The core chamber slammed into Lyra's senses like a supernova. Raw energy, visible as shimmering violet tendrils, lashed out, biting at her skin. Pain, immediate and searing, ripped through her, a symphony of agony echoing in her mind. Disorientation followed, the chamber spinning, the alien glyphs blurring into meaningless streaks of light. Visions, fragmented and chaotic, assaulted her consciousness. A city of impossible spires, crafted from obsidian and powered by captured stars. Beings of pure energy, their forms shifting and unstable, wielding weapons that unraveled the very fabric of space. A planet consumed by war, its surface scarred and broken, its skies choked with ash. The weapon. A key, a catalyst, a final, desperate act of defiance against an encroaching darkness. Across the chasm in the ruined control room, Stephen gritted his teeth, his vision swimming. He wrestled with the damaged console, sparks flying as he bypassed fried circuits. "Damn it," he muttered, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. He had to get to the medical bay, even remotely. Lyra needed him. He plunged a makeshift needle, a sharpened shard of plasteel, into his arm, injecting a cocktail of stimulants and painkillers scavenged from the outpost's emergency kit. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching darkness. It bought him time, precious, fleeting time. Lyra stumbled forward, the heat intensifying. Before her, the main control interface shimmered, an intricate web of pulsating light and alien symbols. But a barrier, a wall of pure energy, crackled and hissed, barring her path. It was a fortress, impenetrable, mocking her every attempt to approach. She reached out, her Draconis powers flaring, a surge of psychic energy lancing towards the barrier. It met an unyielding resistance, a cold, ancient consciousness pushing back, a silent, implacable will that whispered of endless slumber and cosmic indifference. The sleeping god would not be disturbed. Stephen swore, his fingers flying across the damaged console. He called up the facility's ancient schematics, the holographic projections flickering and unstable. "Lyra," his voice crackled in her ear, strained but clear. "There's a hidden pathway, a series of maintenance tunnels. It's a long shot, but it might bypass the main energy grid." He rattled off a series of coordinates, his voice tight with urgency. "Follow my instructions. It's the only way." He was gambling, relying on his understanding of a technology millennia old, but he had no other choice. A klaxon blared, a piercing shriek that echoed through the facility. On the ruined bridge of the alien vessel, a hulking figure snarled, its reptilian eyes glinting with anticipation. "The signal is confirmed. Initiate approach vector. Prepare for planetary bombardment." Lyra hesitated for only a moment, then turned, plunging into the darkness. The hidden pathway was a labyrinth of crumbling corridors and malfunctioning machinery. Steam hissed from broken pipes, acid dripped from corroded ceilings, and flickering lights cast long, dancing shadows. Security systems, long dormant, flickered back to life, laser grids slicing through the air, automated turrets swiveling to target her. "Damn it, Stephen," she muttered under her breath. "Almost there," Stephen said, his voice filled with strain. "I'm disabling the turret grid in Sector 4. Now." A section of the laser grid flickered and died, creating a narrow opening. "Go, Lyra, go." She squeezed through the gap, the air thick with ozone and the smell of burning metal. Ahead, she saw the source of the energy barrier, a series of ancient artifacts, pedestals topped with glowing crystals, scattered throughout the core chamber. They pulsed with power, resonating with the energy field, acting as anchors, stabilizing the barrier. She reached out psychically, touching one of the crystals. A flood of images washed over her, rituals performed in forgotten languages, sacrifices made to appease the sleeping god, a desperate attempt to contain the planet's power. The connection was fragile, fleeting, but it revealed a weakness, a vulnerability in the system. Static crackled in Stephen's ear. He focused, filtering out the noise, isolating a garbled transmission. Planetary weapon, imminent activation, subjugate all. The words were fragmented, distorted, but the intent was clear. The aliens were coming, and they were coming to destroy. Lyra focused, the weakness coming into view. The sleeping god's weakness was that it dreamed of what might be, and the artifacts held those dreams. She saw a vision of herself, standing tall, her draconis heritage a source of strength, not a target for oppression. She saw a future where humans and draconis fought side by side, not as enemies but as allies. The sleeping god did not want this outcome. Lyra, Stephen's voice was weak, fading. They're almost here. The warship. You have to hurry. She tore her mind away from the vision, focusing on the task at hand. The artifacts hummed with power, resisting her every attempt to disrupt their connection. But she pressed on, drawing on her draconis strength, her purpose fueled by the visions of the past and the hope for the future. With a final surge of power, she severed the connection. The energy barrier flickered, sputtered, and died, leaving the control interface exposed. Stephen's voice cut out. Silence. Lyra stared at the control interface, her heart pounding. The countdown timer on the console display blinked red. 0000. The hostile alien ship was approaching the planet. She had a choice to make: activate or disable. The planet's history screamed for retribution, a cleansing fire to erase the stain of countless atrocities. But the vision, the silent screams of a world reborn, not consumed. Lyra's hand hovered over the activation rune, the cold metal biting into her palm. Stephen. She hurled the thought out, a desperate telepathic plea across the void separating their minds. Silence. Only the hum of the weapon and the frantic beat of her own hearts answered. Panic clawed at her throat. He had to be alive. The control interface shimmered before her, an intricate web of glyphs and pulsating energy conduits. Weapon primed. Multiple activation modes available. Planetary incineration. Targeted extermination. Biosuppression. Each option pulsed with malevolent intent. But nestled amongst them, almost hidden, were the override commands. She remembered Stephen hunched over a similar console back on the outpost, his brow furrowed in concentration, the holographic schematics dancing in his eyes. The Draconis tech is elegant, powerful. But there's always a backdoor, a failsafe. Find the core systems, Lyra. Learn to reroute the flow. You can override anything, even a goddamn planet killer, if you know where to look. Her vision was clear now. The planet deserved a chance. She would trust Stephen's teachings, trust her own instincts. I disable, she whispered, the words firm despite the tremor in her voice. Lyra's fingers danced across the interface, inputting the deactivation code sequence. Each press of a rune sent a jolt of energy through her, a painful echo of the weapon's power. Override command. Initiate, bypass, terminate, the planet groaned. A low, guttural rumble vibrated through the soles of her feet, up her spine, into the very core of her being. The lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the chamber. Then a complete blackout. Emergency lights sputtered to life, painting the room in a sickly, pulsating green. You dare defy me. The thought crashed into her mind, a tidal wave of raw, ancient power. The planet's sleeping god, its consciousness was awake, and it was furious. Images flooded her mind, cities burning, skies choked with ash, her own people enslaved. Lyra recoiled, clutching her head, but she held firm. She focused on Stephen's face, his gentle smile, the unwavering belief in her. She would not break. She would not yield. Drawing upon her own latent psychic abilities, she erected a mental shield, deflecting the onslaught of the planet's rage. The deactivation sequence continued. A harsh, metallic voice boomed through the facility's comm system. "Draconis subject, this is Warship Annihilator. You are ordered to activate the weapon immediately. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination." Lyra ignored them. Every ounce of her being was focused on the interface, on the cascading lines of code, on the desperate hope that she was doing the right thing. Then a flicker, a warmth in her mind, a familiar presence, faint but unmistakable. "Lyra, finish it. I believe in you." Stephen, he was alive, barely but alive. His mental push was a whisper of strength, a surge of energy that coursed through her, reinforcing her willpower. With a final, desperate surge of will, she slammed her fist onto the activation rune. The deactivation sequence was complete. The weapon went silent, inert, but the planet was dying. Cracks spiderwebbed across the floor. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone. The core was destabilizing. Alarms blared as the Annihilator pierced the planet's atmosphere, its shadow falling across the crumbling facility. The alien warship, detecting the weapon's deactivation, immediately launched an assault on the facility. Energy beams ripped through the walls, sending chunks of plascrete raining down. Lyra grabbed Stephen, his body limp and unresponsive. She had to get him out now. The facility was collapsing around them. The main doors were buckled and twisted, nearly impassable. But she saw it a maintenance drone, its power cell miraculously intact, lying amidst the rubble. It wouldn't be enough to save both of them. She knew she must decide. Should she save herself or try to save Stephen? She would save him. Lyra's fingers flew across the drone's control panel, overriding the automated repair protocols with a series of rapid commands. The drone whirred, its manipulators jerking as she wrestled it into manual control. "Override complete," the drone's synthetic voice echoed, devoid of emotion. She ignored it, focusing on the damaged doorway. The mangled metal groaned, protesting as the drone, guided by Lyra's precise movements, began to peel back a section of the door, creating a jagged, barely large enough opening. Sparks showered down, stinging her skin. The facility groaned again, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through her bones. Debris rained down, dust motes dancing in the emergency lights. She had to hurry. Lyra locked her jaw, muscles straining as she gripped Stephen's armpits, dragging him towards the opening. His dead weight was almost too much, but she refused to yield. A chunk of ceiling paneling crashed down where Stephen had been lying moments before, sealing the doorway completely. She didn't pause, didn't look back. Inside, the corridor opened into a surprisingly intact medical bay. Dim emergency lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the sterile surfaces. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. A quick scan revealed most of the equipment was offline, power reserves critically low. Lyra spotted the main generator. It was a bulky, antiquated model, clearly designed for manual operation as a backup. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed the activation lever and began to pump. Her Draconis strength, honed by generations of warriors, allowed her to move the heavy lever, but the effort was immense. Her muscles screamed in protest with each downstroke. Slowly, agonizingly, the generator sputtered to life. The lights flickered brighter, and the diagnostic screens on the medical console illuminated. She scanned Stephen. The readings were grim. His vitals were plummeting, internal bleeding was worsening, and his neural activity was erratic. He needed immediate surgery, and he needed it now. A fresh tremor shook the facility. The alien warship had begun bombarding the exterior, each impact sending shockwaves through the already weakened structure. Time was running out. Lyra rummaged through the surgical kit. Most of the instruments were either shattered or missing, victims of the initial attack. Frustration flared, but she forced it down. Panic wouldn't help. She scanned the room, her eyes darting from one piece of equipment to another, searching for anything she could use. A broken laser scalpel, a shattered sonic probe, a length of fiber optic cable, scraps she could work with. With deft fingers, she began to improvise. She fused the fiber optic cable to the laser scalpel, creating a makeshift cauterizing tool. She reconfigured the sonic probe into a crude tissue manipulator. It was barbaric, but it was all she had. She began the surgery. The flickering lights cast grotesque shadows across Stephen's face as she worked, her brow furrowed in concentration. The air was thick with the smell of blood and burnt metal. Each cut, each suture, was a gamble. Suddenly, the unmistakable sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridor. The alien warship had breached the facility walls. Alien soldiers were storming the corridors. Lyra heard them approaching, their heavy boots pounding against the metal floor, their guttural voices growing louder with each passing moment. She had to finish, and she had to finish now. The monitor flatlined. A piercing alarm blared through the room. Stephen's heart had stopped. Desperation surged through her. Think, Lyra, think. Then she remembered. Stephen, during one of his lectures about Draconis physiology, had mentioned a pressure point technique used to stimulate the heart. She had never tried it, never needed to, but she remembered the diagrams, the precise location. With trembling fingers, she located the pressure point on Stephen's chest and applied firm, steady pressure. Nothing. She pressed harder, channeling all her strength into the single point. A jolt. Stephen gasped, his body arching against the table. The alarm silenced. His heart flickered back to life on the monitor. A volley of plasma fire ripped through the door, showering the medical bay with sparks and molten metal. The alien soldiers were here. Lyra finished the final suture, sealed the incision with the makeshift cauterizer, and ripped the drone free from the wall. It was damaged, sparking, barely functional, but it was still a barrier. She positioned it in front of the door, creating a temporary shield. Then she grabbed a discarded alien pulse rifle, its cold, alien metal unfamiliar in her hands. She knew she was no match for the soldiers. They were heavily armed, battle-hardened, but she would buy Stephen time. Time to stabilize, time to heal, time to live. Lyra set the medical bay's environmental controls to vent all oxygen and initiated a lockdown. The facility groaned. The drone sputtered and died, its power reserves exhausted. Pulse rifle raised, Lyra braced herself for a final stand. The door buckled inward as the alien soldiers began to breach it. Suddenly, a hand shot out, grabbing the pulse rifle. Stephen, eyes blazing with a fierce, almost feral intensity, fired a burst of plasma, the blue bolts incinerating the lead soldier as he stepped through the doorway. Stephen crumpled. Lyra caught him, his weight nearly pulling her down. His breath hitched, a wet, rattling sound that sent a shard of ice through her Draconis heart. She lowered him to the cold metal floor, her hands slick with his blood. Stephen. He didn't respond. She pressed 2 fingers to his throat, finding a faint, erratic pulse. Internal bleeding. He needed immediate attention, more than she could provide. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced it down. Stephen had saved her life. She wouldn't let him die. Lyra scanned the medical bay. The shelves were mostly bare, ransacked during the attack. A few scattered bandages, empty vials, a half-empty oxygen tank. The glowing medical scanner lay shattered on the floor, useless. The remaining supplies wouldn't be enough. There was only one option. Escape. She remembered the maintenance tunnels Stephen had mentioned, a network of narrow passages running beneath the facility. Risky, but it was their only chance. But Stephen was too weak to walk, let alone fight. He wouldn't even wake up. Lyra tried to lift him, but his dead weight was too much. Her muscles strained, her cybernetic enhancements whirring in protest. She couldn't carry him. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a solution. A discarded power cable, a torn sheet of duraplast, a length of reinforced tubing. Her mind raced, piecing together a plan. Working quickly, she fashioned a makeshift harness, weaving the cable and tubing into a crude support system. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it would allow her to drag him. She secured the harness around Stephen's chest, wincing at the pain it must be causing him, even unconscious. As she prepared to move him, a distant sound reached her ears. Heavy footsteps, alien voices. They were getting closer. Lyra tightened her grip on the harness, her violet eyes narrowed. She needed a diversion. She spotted a junction box on the wall, its wires exposed and sparking. An idea formed in her mind. It was risky, but it might buy them some time. With a swift movement, she ripped a loose cable from the wall and jammed it into the junction box. A shower of sparks erupted, followed by a deafening explosion that shook the entire room. The lights flickered and died, plunging the medical bay into darkness. The alien voices grew louder, filled with alarm. Now. Lyra heaved on the harness, dragging Stephen's limp body across the floor. The tunnel entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. She winced as she scraped her shoulder against the rough metal, ignoring the pain. The tunnel was dark, claustrophobic. The air was thick with dust and the smell of ozone. Damaged sections of the tunnel forced her to crawl. Exposed wiring crackled with electricity, threatening to shock her with every movement. Left at the junction, a weak voice rasped. Lyra stopped, peering down at Stephen. His eyes were open but unfocused. "Stephen, can you hear me? Tunnel, junction, left," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Security, door." He was right. Stephen, despite his injuries, was still thinking tactically. His knowledge of the facility could save them. Lyra followed his instructions, dragging him through the twisting tunnel. The alien voices were getting closer, echoing through the narrow passages. They reached the security door. It was a heavy, reinforced barrier designed to withstand heavy fire. A small keypad was set into the wall beside it. Lyra tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. She examined the keypad, but she didn't know the access code. Stephen mumbled, his eyes closed again. "Maintenance, override, 379, Alpha, Echo." Lyra quickly punched in the code. A series of clicks and whirs echoed from behind the door. A small red light turned green. But the door didn't open fully. It shuddered, budging only a few centimeters. It was still locked, held in place by some internal mechanism. "I can't." Lyra strained, her draconis muscles burning. "It won't open." Stephen groaned, his face contorted in pain. "Force it. You have to." Lyra braced herself, planting her feet against the tunnel wall. She gripped the edge of the door with both hands, her squeezing hard. With a guttural roar, she pulled. The metal screeched in protest, bending and twisting. The door groaned, inching open wider. Pain shot through Lyra's arms and shoulders, but she refused to give up. Slowly, agonizingly, the door creaked open, revealing a dark, cavernous space beyond. They tumbled into the storage bay, landing hard on the cold, concrete floor. The bay was huge and empty, filled with rows of deactivated machinery and stacks of discarded equipment. Lyra scrambled to her feet, helping Stephen up beside her. He leaned heavily against her, his breathing shallow and ragged. "There," Stephen croaked, pointing to a darkened corner of the bay. "Hidden." Compartment. Lyra followed his gaze, spotting a small, recessed panel in the wall. She hurried over to it, pulling it open to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled in a layer of protective foam, was a small, battered escape vehicle. "The primary drive is offline," Stephen said, his voice gaining strength. "But the secondary drive, it's operational, enough to get us out of here." Before they could attempt any repairs, a piercing alarm blared through the storage bay. The heavy doors at the far end of the room slammed open, and a squad of alien soldiers poured in, their weapons raised. Lyra and Stephen were trapped. The escape vehicle was their only chance, but the aliens were closing in, and they were out of time. Lyra whirled, snatching a discarded energy rifle from the floor. It was alien-made, heavy and unfamiliar, but she leveled it with surprising speed. A trio of insectoid soldiers poured through the doorway, their chitinous bodies gleaming under the flickering emergency lights. 3 rapid bursts of emerald energy erupted from the rifle, each finding its mark with lethal precision. The soldiers collapsed in a twitching heap, buying Stephen precious seconds. He cursed, his breath ragged as he scrambled towards the escape vehicle. The primary drive was a mangled mess of wires and scorched metal. "No good," he rasped, wiping sweat from his brow with a grease-stained hand. "It's fried. We're not going anywhere on that. What now?" Lyra's voice was tight with fear, her grip white-knuckled on the rifle. Stephen pointed towards a smaller, auxiliary engine. "Secondary drive. It's our only shot. Get over there, I'll guide you." He rattled off a simplified repair procedure using terms he hoped she'd understand. "Focus on the power coupling. See that blue wire? It needs to be reconnected to the flux regulator." Another wave of soldiers charged into the bay, their weapons spitting plasma bolts. The air crackled with energy, the smell of ozone and burning metal stinging Stephen's nostrils. He returned fire with his sidearm, each shot a desperate prayer. Lyra struggled with the repair, her hands trembling. The Draconis language, the language of warriors, did not have words for flux regulators. Her fingers fumbled with the unfamiliar tools, her vision blurring with pain. "I am failing him," she thought, the weight of her people, of her own survival pressing down on her. Stephen, his legs screaming in protest, crawled towards a damaged control panel. He needed to reroute power to the secondary drive, give Lyra a chance. Sparks flew as he ripped wires from their sockets, ignoring the searing pain that shot up his arm. He managed to bridge a connection, a surge of power coursing through the vehicle. The lights flickered, momentarily dimming before brightening again. The diversion worked, but it had also alerted the soldiers to his location. They converged on him, their insectal faces contorted in rage. Lyra, seeing Stephen's peril, gritted her teeth. She strained against a mangled component, her Draconis strength finally giving way. With a guttural cry, she forced the piece into place, completing a crucial step in the repair. An alien soldier rounded on Stephen, raising its weapon. Lyra, without hesitation, hurled a heavy wrench. It struck the soldier's arm, sending the weapon clattering to the floor. But the noise attracted more attention, more enemies closing in. "Lyra," Stephen yelled, his voice strained. "Bypass the safety interlock. The red panel, small switch, flip it." Lyra hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. "But the engine could overload. It is not safe. We don't have a choice." Stephen shouted, his voice hoarse. "Do it now." Torn between her ingrained caution and her growing trust in Stephen, Lyra made her decision. Her hand trembled as she flipped the switch. Sparks erupted from the panel, alarms blaring, the acrid smell of burning circuits filling the air. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then, with a deafening roar, roared to life. More soldiers poured through the storage bay doors, unleashing a storm of plasma fire. Lyra slammed her fist on the launch activator. The escape vehicle shuddered, its magnetic clamps releasing with a clang. It lurched forward, narrowly avoiding a direct hit that would have vaporized them both. The escape vehicle accelerated out of the storage bay, crashing through a weakened section of the facility wall. The impact sent a jolt through their bodies, but they were free. They were in space. A moment of weightless silence, broken only by their ragged breathing. Then, alarms started to blare inside the ship, a cacophony of red lights flashing across the cramped cockpit. Stephen, ignoring the pain in his legs, scanned the control panels. "Damn it," he muttered. "There's a hidden tracking device embedded in the hull. They're following us." He then noticed another panel, this one blinking with a steady green light. "Wait. This ship is equipped with communications equipment. It has a direct line to your home world." Lyra stared at the panel, her expression unreadable. She was silent for a long moment, then spoke. I do not know if I can trust them," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But we are running out of options." She looked at Stephen, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "I give you my word, Stephen. If we use it, I will not let them hurt you." "It's broadcasting a signal strong enough to paint a target on us," Stephen said, his fingers flying across the console, highlighting a pulsating node on the schematic. We need to disable it now. Lyra watched him, her amber eyes narrowed. Disable it? That's a communications array. How else am I supposed to contact my people? Contacting them directly is the last thing we should do, Stephen countered, meeting her gaze. That signal is a highway for anyone tracking you, especially them. I need to tell them I'm alive, Lyra insisted, her voice tight with urgency. She reached for the comm panel. They need to know. Stephen gripped her wrist gently, stopping her. And alert whoever wants you dead to exactly where we are. Think, Lyra, they tortured you. They wouldn't let you escape without a safety net for them. This escape pod is small enough to be completely missed without a signal, but a signal says here we are. Then what do you suggest? She snapped, pulling her arm away. The raw edges of her burns seemed to throb with her anger. We sit here and wait to die. Stephen ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion etched on high number ace. No, we modify the short-range scanner, boost the signal, scramble the frequency. Send out a coded distress signal that only your people will recognize, masked as background radiation. It'll be risky, drawing power from the life support, but it's our best shot at getting a message out without handing them our location on a silver platter. Lyra hesitated, her gaze flickering between Stephen and the comm panel. And you can do this. Modify. Scanners. I've jury-rigged worse, Stephen said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. But it'll be tight. We'll be running on fumes. Lyra bit her lip, her internal struggle evident. Finally, she nodded, a flicker of trust in her eyes. All right, but if this fails... Then we're both space dust, Stephen finished, turning back to the console. Let's get to work. They worked in silence, the hum of the escape pod filling the cramped space. Stephen, his brow furrowed in concentration, spliced wires and rerouted power conduits, his movements precise and efficient. Lyra, despite her initial reluctance, assisted, holding tools and offering insights into the Draconis systems, though a shadow of doubt still lingered in her eyes. What's it like back there? Stephen asked after a while, his voice low, not looking up from the circuitry. Lyra paused, her fingers hovering over a panel. Where? On your homeworld with your people, Stephen clarified. Before all this. She hesitated, then spoke, her voice tinged with a sadness that resonated deep within Stephen. It was ordered, honorable. My people value strength, duty, but also tradition. I fear I no longer fit in with them. Stephen finally looked up, his gaze meeting hers. What do you mean? You saved me, she said quietly. A human saved me. Will they see that as weakness? Stephen's heart clenched. Don't let them do that to you, Lyra. Don't let anyone tell you that surviving is weakness, or that needing help is. He paused, his expression hardening. Besides, I worry about you going back. What if they want to use you? A symbol, a rallying cry. What if they don't care about you? Lyra didn't answer. She simply turned back to the panel, her silence heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Stephen straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow. All right, signals ready, power rerouted, frequency scrambled. Let's hope this works. He initiated the modified distress signal, masking it within the sensor anomalies of a nearby asteroid field. The escape pod shuddered as it siphoned power from the life support. Almost immediately, a response. A Draconis warship, its signal strong and clear, hailed them on a secure channel. Lyra gasped, relief flooding her face. It's them. It worked. She scrambled to the comm panel, her fingers trembling as she activated the connection. This is Lyra. I require immediate extraction. I am in distress. The voice that answered was crisp, formal, and devoid of warmth. Lyra, daughter of, we confirm your identity. Lyra sagged against the console, a wave of relief washing over her. Thank the stars. I am ready to be extracted. We were already aware of your location, Lyra, the voice continued, the coldness in its tone sending a shiver down Stephen's spine. The escape pod was equipped with a homing beacon. Lyra frowned. A homing beacon, but we know of your human companion, the captain said, the words dripping with disdain. A set of coordinates flashed on the screen. We are transmitting rendezvous coordinates. Expect a full debriefing upon arrival. Stephen's mind raced. A homing beacon, not external, embedded within the Draconis comm system itself, someone within her own ranks. Lyra stared at the screen, her face paling. But that's impossible. A homing beacon, my own people. Her voice trailed off, disbelief warring with dawning horror in her eyes. Lyra recoiled as if struck, her hand flying to her neck, fingers pressing against the faint scar left by the tracker's removal. Her eyes, usually bright with tenacity, were now clouded with a profound, wounded confusion. Who could have done this? She whispered, the question more to herself than to Stephen. Stephen gently took her hand, his touch firm and reassuring. We'll figure it out, Lyra. We will. It doesn't matter who planted it. What matters is we know now. We can be careful. He saw the devastation in her eyes, the shattering of her trust, and a familiar ache resonated within him. He knew what it was like to have the foundations of your world crumble beneath your feet. A crackle of static filled the cramped escape pod, followed by a clipped, authoritative voice. Escape pod designated LX-492, this is Draconis warship Valiant. Power down all weapon systems and prepare for docking. You are to remain in your vessel until further instructions. Any deviation from these orders will be met with lethal force. Stephen's hand tightened on Lyra's. Lyra, something doesn't feel right, that transmission. It's too formal, too cold, and they know our designation already. Maybe we should hold back, assess the situation. Lyra pulled her hand away, her teeth clenched with a stubborn grit. This is protocol, Stephen. They are Draconis. They are here to help me. Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the doubt that gnawed at her. I have to believe that. Stephen sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. He knew that look. It was the look of someone clinging desperately to hope, even when logic screamed otherwise. All right, he conceded reluctantly. But humor me. Let me run a few diagnostics, just in case. He turned away, his fingers already dancing across the escape pod's control panel. He rerouted power, subtly boosting the pod's sensor array, masking the action behind a series of routine system checks. He trusted his gut, and right now, his gut was screaming. As they approached the Valiant, its immense silhouette dwarfing their tiny escape pod, Stephen's unease intensified. He was picking up subtle discrepancies in the warship's transponder code's minor variations, almost imperceptible but enough to trigger his suspicion. They flickered in and out like a faulty hollow projector. Lyra, he said, his voice low and urgent, I'm getting some weird readings from their transponder. The codes are fluctuating, not consistent with standard Draconis fleet protocols. This could be a trap. Lyra rounded on him, her eyes flashing with anger. Stop it, Stephen. You're being paranoid. They are here to rescue me. Why would they lie? Her voice cracked on the last word, revealing the raw fear that fueled her denial. Before Stephen could respond, a powerful tractor beam locked onto the escape pod, engulfing it in a field of shimmering energy. They were being pulled in, helpless against the warship's immense power. The pod shuddered violently as it was drawn into a vast docking bay. The bay doors hissed open, revealing a squad of Draconis soldiers clad in full combat armor, their weapons leveled. The air crackled with tension. These weren't welcoming arms. They were a firing squad in waiting. Leading the squad was a Draconis woman with a stern, almost cruel face. Commander Zara, her armor pristine, her posture rigid. She surveyed Lyra with cold, appraising eyes, offering no hint of warmth or recognition. Secure the escape pod, Zara barked, her voice sharp and devoid of emotion. Escort the prisoner to the bridge. She didn't even acknowledge Stephen's presence, treating him as if he were a piece of space debris. Prisoner. Stephen stepped forward, his voice tight with controlled anger. She's a Draconis citizen. Daughter of Zara cut him off with a dismissive wave of her hand. The human is irrelevant. My orders are to secure the prisoner and deliver her to Captain Vorik. Your species is not permitted on the bridge. Lyra finally found her voice, her eyes blazing with indignation. "Commander Zara, this is Stephen Reyes. He saved my life. He will be treated with respect." Zara turned her cold gaze upon Lyra. "Your safety is my only priority, Princess. The human will be confined until his usefulness can be assessed." The princess title hung in the air, a stark reminder of Lyra's heritage and a chilling promise of political machinations to come. Zara's coldness, the soldier's unwavering hostility. Stephen's suspicions were confirmed, but Lyra, blinded by hope and desperation, couldn't or wouldn't see it. Zara gestured to two soldiers, who moved forward and grabbed Stephen's arms, their grip surprisingly strong. "Confine him to holding cell Beta 9. He will be interrogated later." As they dragged him away, Stephen locked eyes with Lyra, his gaze filled with warning and a desperate plea for her to understand. He saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a fragile hope. He knew with a sinking feeling that she was walking into a trap. Lyra was led away, her head held high, but her steps faltering slightly. She was escorted onto the bridge, a vast, sterile chamber filled with blinking consoles and stern-faced Draconis officers. Standing at the command center, his back to her, was Captain Vorik, the commander of the Valiant. He turned slowly as she approached, his expression unreadable. "Lyra," he said, his voice resonating with a deep, controlled power. "You are accused of treason against the Draconis people." Lyra gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Treason? That's impossible. I would never." Vorik raised a hand, silencing her. "The evidence suggests otherwise. You are accused of collaborating with the humans and endangering Draconis security." "That's a lie," Lyra cried, her voice rising in desperation. "I was captured, tortured. I would never betray my people." Vorik stepped forward, his eyes cold and unwavering. "We have evidence that you sent classified information to the human outpost, knowing that it would compromise our defenses." He gestured to a holographic display, where lines of complex data scrolled across the screen. Lyra stared at the display, her knees going weak. The data seemed irrefutable, a clear record of transmissions sent from her personal comm unit to the human outpost. But she had never sent those messages. Never. A wave of dizziness washed over her, a sickening realization dawning in her mind. She had been framed, betrayed by someone she trusted, someone within her own ranks. The warship bridge seemed to tilt around her, the faces of the Draconis officers blurring into a sea of accusing eyes. She was alone, utterly and completely alone. The cold metal of the interrogation chair pressed against Lyra's spine, a stark contrast to the burning anger simmering within her. Across the polished table, Vorik's reptilian eyes narrowed. "The timestamps are clear, Lyra. Communication logs don't lie. On stardate 784-3, you transmitted classified fleet movements to an unknown source." Lyra slammed her fist on the table, the sound echoing in the stark chamber. "That's impossible. I never sent any such information. The timestamps are wrong, the protocols are inconsistent with standard Draconis procedure. Someone has manipulated this data." Vorik steepled his fingers, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Concerns noted, daughter of Valerius, but the evidence is irrefutable. The Council will determine your punishment. Treason carries a heavy price, even for those of noble blood." "I demand to see the original data logs," Lyra insisted, her voice rising. "The evidence you're presenting could easily have been fabricated. Show me the raw data, the unedited files." Vorik rose, his shadow looming over her. "Your request is denied. The security protocols surrounding such sensitive information are absolute. Your attempts to deflect blame are unconvincing." He turned and strode towards the door, leaving Lyra seething with frustration. Across the warship, in a cramped holding cell, Stephen ran a hand along the cool, metallic wall. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and disinfectant, a sterile cocktail that did little to calm his racing heart. He scanned the room, noting the position of the energy grid, the access panel near the door, the limited field of vision of the guard station. An escape, however improbable, was his only option. He slumped against the wall, feigning a sudden wave of nausea. Clutching his stomach, he let out a series of ragged coughs. "Guard, I don't feel well. I need a medic." The guard, a hulking draconis with scales the color of obsidian, eyed him with suspicion. "Humans are fragile creatures. What ails you?" "I think some kind of internal rupture," Stephen gasped, pressing his hand against his side. "I need a medical scan. Immediately." He let out another, more convincing groan. After a tense moment, the guard relented. "Fine. But try anything, human, and you'll regret it." He activated the comm, requesting medical scan for prisoner Reyes, possible internal trauma. Minutes later, Stephen was strapped into a diagnostic scanner, its cold probes pressing against his skin. As the machine whirred to life, he focused his mind, recalling the schematics of the ship's power grid he'd overheard during his capture. He knew he had one shot. He manipulated the scanner's controls, rerouting power, pushing the circuits beyond their limit. A high-pitched whine filled the room, followed by a shower of sparks. The cell plunged into darkness. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared, and the guard yelled in alarm. Stephen ripped himself free from the scanner, using the confusion to his advantage. He knew the layout of this section of the ship better than they did. He navigated the dimly lit corridors, relying on his memory and a gut instinct, pushing past panicked crew members. Back in the holding block, Zara entered Lyra's cell, her expression troubled. "Lyra, I don't believe you did this." Lyra looked up, surprised. "Zara, but why would you risk coming here?" "I've always admired your family, Lyra," Zara confessed, her voice low. "Your father's integrity. Your own dedication to the Draconis people. Something doesn't add up. I suspect a conspiracy within the High Command." "Vorik?" Lyra asked, her eyes narrowing. "Perhaps," Zara replied, her gaze darting nervously towards the door. "I can't say for sure. But I'm willing to help you find the truth. Unofficially, I can get you access to certain areas, bypass some security checkpoints, but you have to be careful, if we're caught." Meanwhile, Stephen reached the warship's central computer core, a vast chamber filled with humming servers and flickering holographic displays. He needed to access the original data logs, the unedited files that would clear Lyra's name. But as he approached the main terminal, he realized the logs were heavily encrypted, protected by a complex Draconis code. He needed a decryption key. Zara slipped Lyra a small, metallic card during a seemingly casual embrace. "This will grant you access to the lower levels, past Checkpoint 7. Be discreet." Lyra, her heart pounding, used the access code to bypass the security checkpoint, her mind racing. She needed to reach the communications room. If she could send a message to her father, alert him to what was happening, there might still be a chance. Back in the computer core, Stephen managed to partially decrypt the data logs. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, resolving into fragmented images and snippets of text. And then he saw it, a hidden file, meticulously concealed within the system. Evidence. Evidence of Vorik's involvement in the conspiracy. He quickly downloaded the partial data to a portable drive, knowing that he needed the full decryption key to expose Vorik's treachery. As Lyra reached the communications room, Vorik stepped out of the shadows, blocking her path. "I knew Zara was a fool. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate her betrayal?" Lyra stood her ground, her eyes blazing with defiance. "What do you want, Vorik?" "To consolidate my power," Vorik hissed. "To push for a more aggressive war strategy against the humans. And you, Lyra, are the perfect scapegoat. Your fall will silence dissent and rally support for my agenda." Stephen, hidden in the computer core, tried to send the partial data to Lyra's comm device, but the ship's communication systems were suddenly locked down. Vorik's doing. He was cut off. Lyra was placed under house arrest, confined to her quarters. As the guards escorted her inside, she felt a small, hard object pressed into her hand. "Zara." The data chip felt cold against her palm. It contained the information, a hidden data connection, and the means to decrypt it, but INIK was closing in. Lyra, alone in the cramped quarters, her heart hammering against her ribs, pressed the activation rune on the data chip. The faint hum of Draconis tech filled the sterile air, a stark contrast to the silence she craved. The walls felt like they were closing in, each moment amplifying the risk. She needed a secure channel, a whisper in the storm of Voric's control. Meanwhile, deep within the labyrinthine maintenance tunnels, Stephen worked feverishly. Sparks flew as he spliced wires, rerouting the signal of a battered maintenance drone. The flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows, painting the scene with a desperate urgency. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, his breath clouding in the recycled air. "Give me something." On the bridge, Voric hit his fist on the command console. "Lock down all communication systems. No transmissions in or out. Find Reyes. He will pay for his insolence." The warship shuddered as Voric's orders rippled through its systems, sealing bulkheads and rerouting power. Back in her quarters, Lyra navigated the labyrinthine layers of the ship's systems, her fingers flying across the interface. Each failed attempt sent a jolt of fear through her. Finally, she found it, a dormant, low-frequency channel designed for emergency distress signals, a relic from a bygone era. "Pray this works," she whispered, initiating a short burst of data towards Stephen's last known location. A cascade of static erupted in Stephen's makeshift comm station. He swore, then froze. Beneath the noise, a faint, rhythmic pulse. He adjusted the frequency, filtering the signal. "Draconis data packet," he breathed, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. It was Lyra. The signal was weak, fragmented, but enough. He pinpointed the approximate location, a section of the ship near the central data core. Lyra, emboldened by the connection, moved on to the next stage. Zara's access codes. A bitter taste filled her mouth. Zara had risked everything. She input the sequence, the ship's network acknowledging the authorization. The encrypted data file shimmered on the screen, a fortress of complex algorithms. On the bridge, an alarm blared. Voric whirled around, his face contorted with rage. "Zara, unauthorized access to restricted areas. Find her. Execute her immediately for treason and conspiracy." Stephen stared at the encrypted data log, his brow furrowed in concentration. A series of complex algorithms swam before his eyes, a chaotic dance of numbers and symbols. He recognized elements of Draconis encryption, but also something else, something alien. He began to manually crack a portion of the code, relying on his understanding of mathematics and a lifetime of pattern recognition. Lyra, knowing time was running out, accessed Zara's personal data chip, retrieving additional security keys and algorithms. She transmitted them to Stephen via the established data link, a lifeline stretched across the digital void. Stephen, his fingers flying across the console, used his knowledge of alien technology, gleaned from countless hours of study and observation, to create a program. He wasn't sure if it would work, but it was his only chance. A decryption program cobbled together from salvaged components and sheer desperation, capable of unlocking at least a significant portion of the stolen data. Suddenly, a klaxon wailed. Red lights flashed. Stephen cursed. He was cornered. Voric's security forces had found him. He initiated an improvised escape, triggering a cascade of power surges that caused a brief but critical system disruption, buying him precious seconds. Lyra, seeing the opportunity, seized it. She bypassed a high-level firewall, gaining access to the warship's main data core. Lines of code scrolled past her vision, a dizzying torrent of information. Just as she reached the final layer of security, she heard the heavy thud of boots outside her quarters. Her guards were coming. Stephen, his heart pounding, completed his decryption program. He initiated the process, knowing that it would consume significant processing power and risk detection. But he had no choice. He had to know what Voric was hiding. the decryption sequence commenced. The progress bar crawled across the screen, agonizingly slow. Fragments of data began to appear, tantalizing glimpses of the truth. Vorik's betrayal, a conspiracy that threatened the entire Draconis civilization, was slowly being revealed. Just as the crucial information was about to be fully revealed, the door to Lyra's quarters burst open. Vorik's forces flooded the room, weapons raised. The data link severed. The screen went black. The heavy door hissed shut, sealing Lyra inside her quarters. Red emergency lights pulsed, painting the room in a frantic crimson glow. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each one a painful reminder of Zara's betrayal. She had mere minutes, perhaps seconds. Below deck, Stephen moved with a practiced ease through the narrow, grimy maintenance tunnels. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of ozone and the musty scent of disuse. Each step echoed faintly in the cramped space. He bypassed a security camera, short-circuiting its power supply with a flick of his wrist, then rerouted ventilation, subtly altering the airflow to mask their movements. On the bridge, Vorik's face contorted in a mask of cold fury. "Breach her quarters," he snarled, his voice amplified by the ship's comm system. "Lethal force is authorized. She is not to leave this ship alive." Inside her quarters, Lyra scanned her surroundings, her Draconis eyes cataloging every object with a warrior's precision. A discarded data pad, a broken stasis tube, even the sharp edge of a ventilation grate, each could become a weapon. She ran her fingers along the reinforced door, analyzing the locking mechanism, searching for a weakness, a flaw. Stephen reached a junction box and with a grunt pried it open. Wires sparked as he rerouted power from a non-essential life support system. A flicker, then darkness. A temporary blackout cascaded through a section of the ship, plunging Lyra's quarters into shadow. Lyra moved. A silent predator in the sudden darkness. The door hissed open, and 2 security guards stormed in, weapons raised. She was on them before they could react. A swift kick to the knee of the first guard, followed by a brutal elbow strike to the throat. The second guard barely had time to register his comrade's fall before Lyra disarmed him, using his own weapon as a club to deliver a disabling blow to his head. Vorik, anticipating Stephen's tactics, deployed specialized units. Figures clad in black armor, their faces obscured by thermal vision goggles, moved with chilling efficiency through the corridors. Energy shields shimmered, deflecting stray blaster fire. They cut off Stephen's escape routes, herding him towards the lower cargo bays. Cornered, Stephen stumbled into a damaged cargo bay, the air thick with the smell of rust and decay. And then he saw it, a hidden cache, concealed behind a collapsed stack of crates. Ancient Draconis weaponry, remnants of a long-forgotten conflict. Plasma rifles with cracked casings, energy blades dulled with age but still. Weapons. Back in her quarters, Lyra worked feverishly at a secondary data terminal, its screen flickering erratically. Lines of code scrolled past, fragmented pieces of a puzzle. She pieced together encrypted communications, deciphering Vorik's secret dealings. Stephen, meanwhile, was rigging the antiquated Draconis weaponry, setting makeshift traps. A tripwire connected to a plasma grenade, a pressure plate activating a jury-rigged energy net. He was buying time, creating a gauntlet for Vorik's forces. The data coalesced on Lyra's screen, painting a horrifying picture. Vorik was planning to hand her over to the hostile aliens, a bargaining chip in exchange for a strategic alliance and advanced weaponry. A cold dread settled in her stomach. He was selling out her people. Stephen, his fingers flying across the control panel, transmitted a coded message, a series of modulated tones on a frequency known only to the Draconis. A desperate plea, a beacon in the darkness. He hoped she was still alive to receive it. Lyra heard it, a faint, almost subliminal pulse in the back of her mind. Stephen's signal. She understood the full extent of Vorik's treachery, the catastrophic consequences for her people. Steven engaged Vorek's elite guards in a brutal, close-quarters battle. He used his knowledge of the ship's layout, the narrow corridors, the blind spots, to his advantage. The ancient Draconis weapons, though outdated, packed a punch, their energy blasts tearing through the guards' armor. Reaching Zara's command console, Lyra overrode the cargo bay door controls. With a surge of power, the massive doors unlocked and swung outwards, exposing Vorek's advancing forces to the void. The sudden vacuum ripped through the bay, sucking out the air and incapacitating the guards. Steven, gasping for breath, stumbled out of the cargo bay, his face streaked with grime and blood. He saw Lyra, her eyes blazing with fury and commitment. They exchanged a brief, urgent glance, a silent acknowledgement of the information they now possessed. Vorek's treachery had to be exposed, but Vorek had survived the cargo bay incident. His voice boomed over the comms. Seal off all sections. Initiate a full purge. Any remaining loyalists are to be terminated immediately. Steven and Lyra knew their time was running out. "We need to split up," Steven said, his voice hoarse. "I'll sabotage the ship's communication systems, prevent Vorek from contacting the aliens." "I'm going to the bridge," Lyra said, her voice steely. "I will broadcast a message to the Draconis fleet. The truth must be known." Lyra barely escaped the ship while it was being attacked. It was destroyed. The escape pod spun lazily, emergency lights casting long, flickering shadows across the cramped interior. Steven floated weightlessly, his breath misting in the chilled air. "Resources?" he asked, his voice tight. Lyra consulted a damaged readout. Minimal, oxygen, dwindling power, barely enough to keep life support online, communications, compromised. She gestured to a sparking console. "The long-range transmitter is beyond repair." Steven pushed himself towards the mangled comms array, his brow furrowed. He ran a diagnostic, his fingers dancing across the damaged circuits. Damn it, fused beyond recognition. He paused, then a flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. The Draconis distress beacon. "It's damaged, but the core matrix is intact." Lyra's eyes widened. I feel something, a faint resonance, a connection to the homeworld, but it's so weak." She winced, clutching her head. "I can't amplify it, not without." Steven was already at work, tearing panels from the pod's power core. Sparks flew as he rerouted energy conduits, his movements precise and frantic. "I can boost the signal, tap into the main power grid, but it's risky, Lyra. We're talking about overloading the system. One surge and we'll be vaporized," Lyra finished, her voice steady. "Do it, Steven, it's our only chance." He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "Hold on tight." With a final surge, he connected the last conduit. The pod shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the power core strained. Then silence. On the comms panel, a single green light flickered. "Signal sent," Steven announced, relief washing over him, but it was short-lived. A harsh, grating alarm pierced the silence. "They know we're here," Lyra whispered, fear creeping into her voice. The enemy, they intercepted the signal." Outside, a crimson light bloomed in the void. A hostile alien patrol ship, sleek and menacing, locked onto their escape pod. Energy weapons charged. "Brace yourself," Steven yelled, throwing the pod into a wild spin. Plasma bolts seared past, vaporizing chunks of the pod's hull. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing her mind. Her silver hair floated around her face, glowing faintly. "Left." Hard left, Steven, now. He obeyed instantly, trusting her instincts. Another volley of plasma fire missed by a hair's breadth. "How are you doing that?" he gasped, wrestling with the controls. I can see them, their movements, their intentions." Her voice was strained but resolute. "Divert power to the shields. I can deflect some of the fire, but not for long." Steven frantically rerouted power, sweat dripping from his brow. The shields flickered and buckled under the relentless assault. "We need a weapon, Lyra, something to even the odds." His gaze fell on the damaged Draconis beacon. An idea sparked in his mind. "The beacon, the core matrix, if I can reconfigure it." He ripped apart the damaged beacon, his fingers flying across the alien technology. Incoming! Lyra cried. Big one, brace! Stephen finished the modification just as the patrol ship unleashed a devastating blast. He triggered the device. A wave of energy, invisible but powerful, erupted from the escape pod. The alien ship shuddered. Its energy weapons sputtered and died. The crimson light faded. We disabled their weapons. Stephen exclaimed, disbelief in his voice, but their reprieve was brief. The alien ship, crippled but not destroyed, activated its emergency beacon. They're calling for reinforcements, Lyra said grimly. More are coming. Then a new light appeared in the distance, a brilliant blue growing larger with impossible speed. A Draconis warship, its sleek hull gleaming in the void. They're here, Lyra breathed, tears welling in her eyes. They heard us. The warship engaged the hostile aliens, unleashing a torrent of energy fire. The alien reinforcements, caught off guard, were quickly overwhelmed. Within minutes, the battle was over. The Draconis warship hailed the escape pod. This is the Draconis vessel Valor. We have you in visual range. Prepare for rescue. A wave of relief washed over Stephen and Lyra. They had survived. Back on the Valor, Lyra stood before the Draconis High Council. Her voice was strong, her eyes filled with conviction. She presented irrefutable evidence of Vorik's treachery, his collaboration with the hostile aliens laid bare for all to see. Vorik, his face pale and drawn, was apprehended. Justice, swift and decisive, was served. Then Lyra spoke of humanity, of Stephen's courage, his ingenuity, his unwavering loyalty. We have been at war for too long, she declared. We have been blinded by our hatred, but I have seen something different. I have seen the potential for collaboration, for understanding. She gestured towards Stephen, who stood beside her. He saved my life. He showed me compassion when others showed only cruelty. He is a human, but he is also an ally. The High Council listened intently, their faces etched with curiosity and cautious hope. After a long deliberation, they rendered their decision. The evidence is compelling. The Council agrees to open diplomatic channels with humanity. Let us begin a new era of peace and understanding. Lyra and Stephen stood together on the bridge of the Valor, watching as Draconis and human ships exchanged greetings. A bridge was being built, not of metal and wires, but of trust and respect. Lyra turned to Stephen, her eyes filled with gratitude. They need someone to show them the way, she said softly, like you showed me.